you started talking to me in this songwrite about your life. And I was like, the literal essence of your songs came from this experience.
Yeah, songwriting just became such medicine to me.
Wow.
I was really depressed, so I just wouldn't come out of my room, for days. My uncle has got in his mind that what we should do is this mountain climbing trip. There's Capitol Peak and there's this mountain called Mount Christiana. Travis and I, we started scaling it, but there's this effect that the sun has on the mountain. It will make something that looks vertical look like it's at an angle. The first time I realized something was up, he started acting a little afraid. When you get scared, it gets hard.
Yeah.
We were climbing and I just heard him say, I think I'm falling.
And you're stuck on the mountain just watching this happen.
And I'm frozen. My uncle said, you can't move. You can't move. Don't move. Just stay still. We'll find a way to get you down. And I said,
hey, everybody, this is Rita Springer. Welcome once again to the Rita Springer podcast and another episode of Worship is My Weapon. I have a new friend on the show today, Kaelob Mecum. I said that right? Kaelob is known as the worship leader at 7Hills Worship. Where in Ohio?
It's in Cincinnati.
Cincinnati, Ohio.
And across the river in Kentucky as well.
But what's your town?
Technically, it's in Kentucky, Florence, Kentucky.
Whoa,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's impossible to explain that to people.
Okay. Yeah. So if you are a fan of worship music, you may be very familiar with 7Hills Worship. They are charting at this point, doing a lot of incredible songs that they have provided for other churches to be at. And Kaelob is the worship leader there. And he has kind of single-handedly, along with obviously
well, I can't say that.
built 7Hills Worship. But the idea kind of came from you, the idea of starting that. And I think I wanted to bring Kaelob on because he started to tell me, we're both with Tim Publishing. Mm-hmm. That's our publishing company. And I had never written with you until, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago.
I've been asking Stacy for a long time.
I know. I don't know why.
Come on, Stacy.
Jeez. And then, so I wrote with you, but we're in text feeds together because we're in the Tim Publishing text feeds. And this guy is so great. He's the worst dad joke teller. Is that what you call yourself? I wouldn't say worst
dad joke. I think incredible dad joke teller, if anything. But
it's so sad though to me because I didn't know, there's a lot of writers there now. And I was like, okay, who's Kaelob? I didn't know that you were with the 7Hills. I haven't placed that. I just don't keep up. And so you would come in with these jokes and I would be like, and then sometimes it'd be crickets.
Oh yeah.
Always. Nobody would respond to you.
People are just now starting to respond.
Yes. And it was like, why isn't anybody responding to this guy? Is he weird? What's going on? Because I would normally try to respond, but I'm like, nobody's responding. The guys aren't even responding to this. What's going on? And your personality is such that it's not like, it's not like you just keep doing it. That's just your personality.
I don't need any validation. I'm going to keep going.
I always feel bad for you. And then I would ask Stacey, she goes, oh my gosh, he's so funny. He's so great. So, and then we were at the Christmas party together. I think that's the first time I actually was like, maybe we met at the barn a couple times in passing, but, you started talking to me, in this songwrite about your life. And I was like, you need to come on the podcast because, this podcast is called Worship is My Weapon. And for good reason. I mean, worship has been a weapon for me. I mean, I would not be alive today if worship hadn't saved my life. And if Jesus hadn't used that to actually stitch me back together. So my mended heart is in response to the fact that worship, I think worship for me is relationship with God, but he provided that communication and that community through music. Yeah. And that's the vehicle where he led me into his heart. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can trust this heart. So when you talked about kind of how you were led into it with the loss of your best friend,
one of my friends,
I was just like, oh, please come and tell us the story of the beginnings of this into a position of pastoring a church that is a growing church. Yeah. Would you guys consider yourself in the mega category now?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you have to do to be mega? 5,000?
I think it just has to be over 2,000.
Oh, over 2,000's a
Yeah.
mega church now.
Yeah.
All right. But getting into that position where you're worship leader and you're pastoring a team, and then you're actually cultivating a worship dynamic out of it, a worship songwriting dynamic out of it, which when I mentor a lot of what I talk about with songwriters and worship pastors is how do I cultivate a songwriting platform in our church that's healthy, viable, and actually feeds the congregation the songs that enrich their lives and then gives credibility to what we are as a vision in the church. Yeah. And so can you just lead us through that? Why will you go back to, like, for you, your beginnings of, you got involved in this, and what was worship in the beginning stages of your life like? Sounds like you had an interesting childhood.
You want me to start there?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was not in a family that church was prioritized, at all.
Yeah.
But there was a sensitivity in my mom about the Lord. She didn't go to church, but she knew he was real.
Yeah.
But
does she come from a background of Christianity or faith?
No.
Wow.
So she was a teenage pregnancy. Wow. My dad was not in the picture, single mom. She ended up joining the military. I bounced around between family members for most of my childhood. And
because she joined the military.
So she joined the military. Well, she actually joined the military. She's going to get mad at me for saying this. Sorry, Mom. But she had like a 3 strikes you're out thing. And she had gotten in trouble for just different stuff as a kid. Yeah. And essentially it was jail time or military back then. Wow. And so she said, I guess I'm going to the military. And she was an underwater welder in the Navy. So really cool job. To be kidding me. She's a cool lady, but so she did that.
Are you an only child?
No, I do have 2 half brother and sisters.
But that came later.
Yeah, much
after
later.
the Navy.
Yeah, they're 10 years younger than me.
Okay.
10 and 12 years younger. And they're awesome. But so she did that, and then she was figuring her life out. So most of my childhood from 1 year's on for a long time until the 4th grade I'd spend a year with a different family member. And so it'd be grandpa this year, grandma this year, because they were divorced. And then it was like, I'm going to go live with my aunt and uncle. I'm going to go this, that. So I just moved around.
Did you see her at all in those years that you were living with relatives?
Yeah, she would visit.
Oh, and she would come back?
She would come on leave, watching the military or whatever. She'd come visit. And
that must have been hard.
And I think, I have to attribute writing to her. She would send me poems, from when she was in the Navy. She'd send me these poems about me or about her love for me or whatever.
Gosh.
And I remember being exposed to poetry early because of that. And I didn't always know what they meant, but my family members would read them to me. So it was kind of a sweet.
But that was like your only treasure from her.
Yeah. Yeah. So we had that. And so it was really cool. And then when she left the military, she wasn't ready to be a mom yet. And she had some traumatic experiences while she was in the military that still, I think, affect her to this day. And so she needed some time to be ready to be a mom. And so, until the 4th grade, I was with different family members. Well, in the 4th grade, we went to live with her. Well, she had rekindled with my father at that time. For me, I think she did that for my benefit. And that was like the worst mistake she could make.
Wow.
Because he's not a great guy.
Wow.
And so that, long story short, without going into too much detail, I'm a very highly abusive drug addict. And so we ended up in witness protection from him. And then we ended up in a homeless shelter for 2 years. And so her and I lived in a women's homeless shelter for 2 years, from 4th grade to almost the 6th grade.
How does that work? Are you leaving during the day and you could only come back at night?
So basically, this is the way ours was. This is in Liberal, Kansas. So if anybody else does it differently, I'm not sure. But we had this house, and it was like a group home, and there were all these women who were victims of domestic violence and drug abuse and different things, and they were like addicts, and they were getting clean, whatever. And we had 3 bedrooms, and in our bedroom, there were just bunk beds. And just multiple bunk beds.
Kind of like you see on the movies.
Yeah. And it was a homeless shelter, but it was a long-term homeless shelter. So you hear about food kitchens where you get to sleep at night. Well, we lived in this house. And so I remember, I don't know how many people I've even told this to, but all of my clothes that I wore from the 4th grade to the 6th grade came from black trash bags that were donated. And they would bring in a black trash bag and they would break it open and they would throw it on the floor and you would just find your size. And that was your clothes. And so we do that. And
oh my gosh, I can't even imagine.
Yeah. And so they would buy, and we get like boxes of canned goods and food for the kitchen. And then like, it was a group effort to cook dinner for everybody, you know, we do that. And I think at the time when we were there were only like 6 women that were living in the shelter.
Yeah.
And the people came and went and you got to see the toxicity of bad relationships, you know, in and out, because people would come in and then they would go right back to.
And were there a lot of kids with these women?
Yeah. So there were 3 other kids and that were around my age. So I had friends and they came and went. I'm trying to think exactly whenever we left. We were there for a few years because we were kind of fearful of your dad, of my dad. You know, there was some things that were said that we were like, hey, well, we have to be here. So we had, nobody knew where we were. I did go to school. I was able to go to elementary school outside of the house the next year, the 2nd year. But he lived somewhere else. And so we didn't really have to worry about that part, but we were just, you know, and we also didn't have any money, and everything that we had owned up to that time had been destroyed by him. And so like we set on fire.
Oh my God.
And so we had nothing, you know, so me and my mom were just all alone in the world and nothing to own. And so, and I remember like, she was, like I said, she never went to church, but she would always say something about God. You know, she'd be like, it's okay, God's got it. And I'm like, what are we talking about?
Right.
Like,
we're in a homeless shelter.
Yeah. And as a kid, I'm like, okay, sure. Great, Mom.
Right,
yeah.
right.
But like also kind of questioning like, okay, well, what do you know about God? You know, we don't go to church. I know the other people. Why don't we go then?
Interesting.
You know, so there was that side of it. I wrote a song recently called Pray, Pray, Pray. And it was about my mom talking about God in like hard times, but we're always kind of wondering, being perplexed, like, well, then why don't we go? And she still doesn't to this day, but she has a relationship with him, which is kind of interesting. But
what does she think about you?
Oh, she's my greatest cheerleader, man. She's awesome.
Wow.
She's come a long way. She had a time of addiction as well after that period that she came out of, and she's been clean for, I want to say she's been clean for 5 or 6 years now.
Wow,
which
amazing.
Has been really, really cool. But she struggled with, I mean, her life has been really hard.
Yeah.
And from the beginning of her life to she's not made the best decisions.
Yeah.
But she's had a hard life.
Hey everybody, I am here to tell you again about a incredible product that I love called the Jase case. The Jase case is a medical case that I have on hand in my cupboard. I just took it with me on a trip overseas and I got sick, so I actually used the antibiotics in there. You build this case customized to medications that you need or that you think you might need in case of an emergency. Right now, the supply chain for prescriptions can sometimes be super taxing and take weeks to get to us. So this is something that is really, really amazing to have on hand. Right now, you can go to jase.com. There are giveaways happening, so you can sign up for the giveaways, as well as build your own case and get a discount with the promo code Rita, R-I-T-A, in checkout. So now is the time to do this and just make your family safer. I love it. I love mine. Have it. Put it right back in the cupboard when I got home, and we'll reorder and restock. And it's really one of the best things, and the peace of mind that I need. Just knowing that I am able to open up something and have all the medications that I need right in there. So go to jase.com, sign up for the giveaways, and then you build your own case. You can get a discount at the end by the promo code Rita, R-I-T-A. Well, how do you come out of that like you are?
I don't know. I think like my wife asks me that a lot.
Good grief.
I still tell her stories about my childhood, and she's like, well, why aren't you more messed up?
Yeah.
And I was like, I think I'm so messed up, but I think God's grace.
I think, you must have been encapsulated by.
And I think, and I'll get to it. The church, my church that I'm at currently, my uncle is the pastor, and in a lot of ways, he saved my life.
Was it her brother?
It's her brother.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So, and I'll get there, but he kind of like created a really soft place for me to land.
Wow.
But yeah, so we went through that. My mom was in multiple relationships and not the healthiest relationships. But I remember like early, because of these like this poem thing that she had kind of got me on as a kid, I liked to write poems. I liked,
Yeah.
the funniest thing is I remember praying to God, and this was my prayer to God at night when I was a kid. And I, for some reason, felt like I had to pray every night. We weren't attending church, but I have to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
More out of fear, I think, or out of friendship. I don't know. And I would say, God, I believe you're real. That was like the first thing I would say. Like, I know you're real. And then I would talk to him about my day. Never ask him, this is what I did today. I did this at school today. And then I did this or the other. It was the weirdest. Like, I look back on it now and I'm like, I kind of wish I talked to God like that still.
Yeah.
Just like, well, then I went to class and then Mrs. Tillman was really hard in math. You know, I mean, it's like, it was the most like, just let me
genuine,
recap my day.
Yeah, authentic.
Like he wasn't there, you know, the whole time.
Like he didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, just in case you missed it, this is what I did. And then also, God, thank you. And then thank you, whatever. And we lived in Section 8 housing. I remember in like elementary school, one of my good friends was shot in a drive-by shooting by his own cousin after a basketball game while we were in elementary school. He was like a middle schooler. So I saw that. Saw my first drug deal when I was in the 5th grade.
Good grief.
Saw all this stuff. I just witnessed all of it and got to see, you know, you see some of the worst parts of humanity, but then you see someone like genuinely overcoming the fact that life isn't fair.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not fair. And it's obviously God is in it all, but some people are dealt a pretty bad hand and they try really hard. And usually the people dealt a bad hand make some bad decisions as well. And that helps, right? Or doesn't help, I should say. But so grew up like that. I found a few really good friends. I made friends with a guy down the street of our Section 8 housing. We lived in these concrete apartments.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting when I look back, and I actually took my wife back to this neighborhood and she cried when she saw it. And I was like, why are you crying? And she's like, I just feel really bad for you. I was like, we don't live there anymore. We have a home now. And so it's fun.
But to think about you as a young man maneuvering through concrete housing with nothing is kind of sad.
But I think when you're a kid, you don't know. You
just don't know that.
I thought
That's
about
all
this.
you know. You don't know anything else.
Yeah. With my kids, I thought about this the other day, that I'm creating their baseline right now.
Yeah.
Like whatever they're experiencing, like I get to create their baseline for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And that was my baseline. So everything has been really kind of incredible since then, right? Just constantly like, God, you're so good. This is really dumb, but we had built a house 3 years ago, and it's not a crazy house or anything, but we built it. We decided what it was going to look like and what color it was going to be. And I walked down from my upstairs into my living room, kitchen area, and I just stood there for a second, and I told my wife, I was like, God did this. This is so cool. She's like, what do you mean? I said, Kirsten, I used to be able to hear gunshots at night. Look at our house. Right. But like, there's no way to explain it other than God. And so we went through all that. I met a friend, his name was Jeff, and Jeff's dad.
He lived in concrete housing.
He did too. And so he lived with a single mom, but he had this like decision that he had made that he was never going to drink. He was never going to do drugs. He wasn't going to do what the bad kids do. Right. And we had the teenage kids in our group, like the older kids, and they were already kind of getting into stuff. Yeah. And so he had just decided that. And so I thought, me too. I'm not going to do anything bad either. And it was because of Jeff. I mean, I don't know. I could have been impressionable, but when that kind of stuff would come around, we're like, no, we're good. We don't want to do that.
And you stuck to it.
And we're just these two guys, and we grew up together, and he was my best friend, you know, from 4th grade or 5th grade, 6th grade until, I just talked to him just texted me the other day. We don't live near each other anymore. Yeah. But, I think in a lot of ways he helped me through that.
He got you through it.
But I think God sent him, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to over spiritualize
it.
But
no, I think that's beautiful.
Like I think God, hey, you need this guy because your mom is not going to give you the best advice sometimes.
Right.
But this kid's going to convict you somehow to be like him.
Yeah.
And you're not going to drink and you're not going to do drugs and you're not going to do all these things. And so I didn't. And we didn't go hang out with those kids. What we did do in high school was we decided we were going to climb buildings. And we're in the middle of the night that we shouldn't be climbing and probably could have still gotten in trouble, but we didn't go party or do any of that stuff. We were figuring out something else. And then he got into music, so I got into music. I was like, well, okay, I want to play guitar.
Well, so you just kind of fed off each other.
Yeah. And so we started, we played in a rock band and we started.
Wow.
And
was that the first time you were like, oh, I really like music?
Yeah. The first time I decided I ever really liked music this is going to be silly, but I heard the song Adam's Song by Blink-182. This is an incredibly sad song.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, this is making me feel something. Why is this making me feel something? And so when I heard it, I was like, I'm going to be a drummer. And so I literally got a paper out and a job. So I was doing a paper out, and I also was working as a kid. I think I was only 15, working at Jase in the shoe department.
Good old Jase.
And I just saved money and I bought a Jase catalog drum set, and I started being the drummer for our band. And I'm a horrible drummer. I'm still a horrible drummer. I was good enough to play for a little while. Yeah. And then we got a real drummer. Thank the Lord.
And then you were like, oh yeah, that's what a real drummer does.
I guess I'll just, well, yeah. And so I was like, wow, you use the hand and the foot at the same time. That's interesting. So that was kind of what I did there. I don't know if I'm telling this right, or is this what you wanted?
Yeah, I love this.
And so that kind of was our introduction to music. Well, then I heard an artist called Gregory Alan Isakov. I don't know if you've ever heard of him before. He's a folk artist. And he told stories like I'd never heard anybody tell a story before.
In a song.
Yeah. And sometimes I was like, I don't even really know what this is about, but I feel everything right now. The whole universe is crashing in around my heart about these songs. And so while I was the drummer, I started writing songs for us. And it was hilarious because they all thought I was the worst singer ever. So I was never going to be the singer of our band. And so I started writing our songs and giving them to our other players and our singer and stuff. I was like, well, what if we sing about this thing and sing about this thing, sing about this thing? Yeah. And writing became a little bit more natural. And then I got an acoustic guitar, bought it from my buddy's girlfriend for $20. And I started writing songs, and I'm writing love songs, or I'm writing just songs about my life and my day. And I'm trying to emulate these folk artists that I'd really fallen in love with. And that kind of convinced me pretty early on that I was a songwriter in some regard. Not because you
loved it so much too.
Right. And I didn't really know what that meant. So I would have never called myself a songwriter if you would have asked. I would have never said, yeah, I'm a songwriter and this is that or the other. I'd be like, I really like to tell stories. That's what I would have probably said. And so that was sort of that way. High school, we did all that. I dipped my foot into that. Life at home was always a struggle.
Crazy,
but I had really good friends. And I always God always just put the right people in my life. I've always attributed that to him, that he would know when I needed someone to kind of intercede, whether I knew it or not.
Looking back, you're able to see that. You probably weren't able to articulate that at your young age.
And I was like one of those guys that I was like, okay, cool, friends. I love new people.
Yeah.
And there was a youth pastor who was really kind to me, and I got to play djembe, in his youth group, and he paid for me to go to camp one year. And I remember going to camp, and that was my first experience with church as a young kid. And I believed in God, but I would not say that I was this following Christian. I had not given my heart to the Lord. And I felt something whenever we were singing the songs. And then there was this girl, I don't even remember her name anymore, but I was so on fire. You go to church camp for the first time. I love God more than anybody else. And so I remember looking at her and I said, I'm going to worship so much harder than you today. Just being silly. And she said, well, I just think it's not about that, right? Isn't it for him? And she's this 15-year-old girl, and she
had something you didn't have.
She just wrecked me. And I couldn't believe what she said. And I was like, oh, you're right. It's not about us.
Yeah.
And then I kind of ashamed to say that I stopped going to church as much, stopped being as involved in the church. started chasing girl.
Yeah.
Went to college. Got into a relationship with this girl, and she had a good family. She loved the Lord, but we didn't prioritize that relationship at all. So I didn't think about it again.
Yeah.
And so I was in college for a couple of years. I realized it was sort of miserable. And
Now, what college did you go to, and what were you doing in college? What was your degree?
so I went to Kansas State, and I was in architectural engineering because I wanted to make as much money as possible.
Got it. You didn't want to go back to concrete housing.
Right, exactly. I had no desire to be an architectural engineer.
Yeah.
But I knew, okay, I can finish this degree in 4.5 years, and I can make 140 grand a year. And
I mean, the fact that you were in college.
Oh yeah.
Most kids in your predicament don't ever get to college.
Right. Well, I mean, I had some help because we were so poor. So I got some grants.
Yeah, of course.
But I did take out loans. And so that was like, actually, this is all this resulting compounding thing of how I got to the church, right? Is all a result of these decisions I'm making. And so I take out loans to go to school. I go to school. I'm in an internship because I worked really hard. I had something to prove. Always had a chip on my shoulder.
Yeah.
Always had a chip on my shoulder. And I worked really hard, and I earned this internship with this international construction company called Balfour Beatty. And I was doing quality control engineering as an intern for them. And I was talking to my mentor there, and he said he had already had a heart attack. All the other guys, I was the youngest by 20 years of anybody there.
Yeah.
And like all these guys had health issues, and they were divorced, and it just wasn't conducive to like any sort of like family. And I've always known, because I was a single mom, I was going to have a family.
Yeah.
I was going to have kids, my wife, we were going to have breakfast together. I don't know why like the thought of breakfast with my kids was such an important thing, because we never did it.
You never had breakfast.
Like I've never had breakfast with my mom. Not in a bad way for her, but that's just not something that we did.
Yeah.
She was already at work.
Right.
She was gone. She had to work a ton to pay for 3 kids eventually, right? And so I asked him, is this how it is? And he said, this is how it is. And you travel for the money, and you work, and then you go home. And I thought, what am I going to do now? Because I have tens of thousands of dollars of student loans. And I don't even want to do this. And I've never wanted to do this. And so I walked into a recruiter's office, and I joined the Marine Corps.
Oh my gosh.
And so I said to
at
him,
19?
I was
20?
I would have been like 21.
21, 2 years into college.
Yeah. And I said to them, I said, hey, if I have student loans, will you guys pay them off? And they said, we'll work on it. And it depends, they're like, but I'm just a dumb kid. I'm like, I don't want to do what I'm still doing. I'm trapped. Will you, if I give you my life, essentially, you know what I mean? Like, and my, however many years, will you pay this debt off? I can't pay it.
Yeah.
And I need to start over, because I felt, I've always had this in me. As soon as I feel trapped, I get really, really nervous.
Yeah.
Because like when you've experienced that kind of thing,
like, it's a trigger for you.
I can't be stuck in this. I can't be trapped in this. I need to feel free.
Yeah.
Even it was just hilarious because I joined the military, but within a few months I was on Yellow Footprints in San Diego, California, getting my head shaved, getting yelled at by grown men, and running miles and miles and miles every day, and having 30 seconds to eat my meals, and being told how to put my shirt on one arm at a time. And
my God.
But it's funny because, so what happened during this is at the very beginning, they ask you what your religion is. And they don't, at that time, I don't know if there's more now, but at this time, it's been like early 2010s, they would have said Protestant, Jewish, you could be a Jedi. That was an option. You could practice the Jedi religion, which was a real hard for me to not say yes, because I like Star Wars.
Gosh.
But I was like, okay, well, I guess
Protestant, or Christian,
Catholic.
Okay,
well, Christian's
Protestant, Protestant or Catholic.
Yeah. And I had to have somebody explain that to me. I was like, well, what's Protestant?
Yeah. And
they're like, well, it's like, it's like Christian.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is it? Like, why didn't you just call it Christian? Okay, I'm Protestant, I guess. That was my.
It's like an old school way to say.
Yeah. And so I didn't understand that. But what I found out is if you said that you wanted to go to chapel while you're in boot camp on Sunday mornings,
you got off.
You get an hour and a half without any drill instructors. And so, and then this was the kicker. They said, well, does anybody want to be the prayer leader? And if you were the prayer leader, you got an extra 30 minutes. And I was like, I'll be the prayer
2
leader.
hours.
I got it. I'm the guy. I'm the prayer leader. I'm such an expert at this. I'm the master Protestant. You know what I mean? Like, but it was, the intentions of it were just trying to get a reprieve from, you know, my drill instructors.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing was, okay, well, I'm going to start leading these people in prayer. Well, they were kind of expectant. I'll never let anybody in prayer.
Right.
So I just started thinking about it. And we got to bring a Bible to boot camp. That's the only thing you got to bring.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll read.
They make you bring a Bible to boot camp.
You can. You're allowed to bring a Bible if you want.
Wow.
And so, and the only reason I brought a Bible was because my friends and family had written notes for me in it, in the margins.
Wow.
Of like scriptures that they enjoyed. Sorry.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I was like, I guess I have to read this thing. And so I started reading different things. And I had not like ever like really, really intentionally gone through the Gospels or anything like that. So I'm like, okay, well, oh, wow. Oh, this is the guy I've been talking to, you know, as a kid.
Yeah.
God, I know you're real. And so I'm going through it all. And I remember like kind of reading it and then being able to lead these guys in prayer and then getting time off. But it sort of started to stick. And the funny thing was they play 3 songs in chapel before the message and they're all recorded.
Yeah.
And so if you guys are out here and you hear this, thank you for what you've done as an artist. But they did Oceans by Hillsong.
Yeah.
And they would play the acoustic version, which is gorgeous.
Yeah.
They would play 10,000 Reasons. And and this is the strange one. They would play Days of Elijah. And so those were
trying to fill all the voids.
Just all you hit all the bases, right? And it's so funny because when they do Days of Elijah, here he comes, all these guys, all these grown men that are in like, we're all in camis, we're doing hand motions as grown men, we're in children's ministry. It's so funny to think back on it. But it's like, we're all supposed to be like really aggressive Marines, like fighting force of America.
And you're
but
like deep and wide.
We're just it's so dorky and really funny, but those were the 3 songs that they did. Well, the song, and it affected everybody, but I remember the melodies and the storytelling of Oceans being like really cool.
Wow. And
I was like, wow, that's such a beautiful song. I've not really ever listened to worship music before. And I don't have access to any other music.
Interesting.
So the only song that I listened to every Sunday for 13 weeks
was Oceans.
And I didn't have any exposure to anything else, but I was like, that's a good song. I can't wait till they play. I started looking forward to it. Like, play that song. Play that song. It's so good. And then after that, you go to combat school, same thing. Chapel on Sunday, they play the same songs. And so we did that as well. And I kind of had this exposure. Well, after that, I bounced around to different places. Well, I ended up in Virginia. And I was in Virginia
stationed in Virginia?
Yeah. So there's an Army base in Virginia called Fort Lee. And I was an ammo tech. And so, which is just...
What's that mean?
I mean, honestly, the simplified version is I just counted bullets. But it was...
That's
like
an ammo tech.
Yeah. And so I had to be aware of like all the different types of ordnance that the Marine Corps uses.
I never in my wildest dreams would I would think this was what you would say was part of your life.
When I'd say it to people, they're like, how many? Like I've skipped over the fact I've also worked on an oil rig in my life. I did that while I was for 6 months while I was in college. I dropped out so that I could help pay because I didn't want to have as much student loan. So I've done a bunch of crazy jobs.
Wow.
Almost died while I was on the oil rigs. So
of course.
It's crazy. But an ammo tech has to just know, different types of ammunition, and then you order it for people. So if people are being deployed or training exercises, you're like, well,
everybody gets a certain amount of ammo.
You need 100,000, rounds of this thing. And so you do all that. But that was what I was doing. Well, I was in Virginia and I had told you I was in a relationship with a girl and something was off. Like something was, you just feel it and something is wrong. And I started seeing like Facebook pictures of her and all of her friends. And there was this guy hanging out with her all the time. And I was like, what is that guy doing there? And I don't know why, but like God was telling me like, hey, you should ask her about that. And I didn't want to ask her because I was like, I'm not insecure.
Right.
And so before I said anything to her, I called. This is actually like right towards the end of me being done. with my time in Virginia before I had transitioned into the reserves after that. And so I called my uncle. It was the first time I talked to him on the phone in 10 years. He texted me on my birthday. I texted him on his birthday. And I had asked him to come to the wedding because her and I were engaged.
Yeah.
Well, the wedding was going to be like 3 months after I got home. I'm in my last 2 or 3 weeks of my service in Virginia. And we're joking around. And he said, well, are you excited about the wedding? And I said, I just don't know if there's going to be a wedding anymore. I was just joking. Mostly.
Yeah.
I think my heart was saying it truthfully, but I wanted it to be a joke. And he said, well, what do you mean? What's going on? And I said, I don't know what's going on. And I started to explain it to him. And he said, oh, it sounds like she's in a relationship with someone else. And I was like, no, wait, man. You don't even know me. You don't know her.
Yeah.
We've been together for 4 years. No. And he's like, look, I hope I'm wrong, but I just want you to know that you can call me if anything happens or whatever. I'm here for you. And then he said, have you ever read the love chapter? And he said, and as I was explaining things to him, he said, I think Kaelob, because you never had a dad, you experienced things without a father and without knowing that there's a father that loves you. Because I was talking about myself and I was down on myself in all these different ways. And he's like, I just need you to know God doesn't see you that way. And so he said, I want you to read it. And everywhere it says love, I want you to put my Father in heaven. And I know that's a common practice, but I was like, okay, well, I'll do it, you know? And so I did it. And I remember being like, oh, this is really messing me up. And I called her, talked to her about it. She was very defensive. No, that's never happened. Well, we essentially were almost on a break at that point. And so I get on the plane to leave Virginia to go back to Kansas City. And the craziest thing was I had a layover in Cincinnati on my way to Kansas City. Well, at first my layover was like 30 minutes. But by the time I got to Cincinnati, the weather was so bad that they canceled my flight to Kansas City. And they didn't have another flight until the next morning at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. And I've never told this part of the story, but while I was in the airport in Virginia coming to Cincinnati, I was passing by this chapel and I felt like I had to get home so bad. I was like, I have to get home. I have to get home. I have to get home. I have to win. Like I have to show her that we're still good and everything is okay.
Yeah.
And it was, I don't know.
And she's in Kansas City.
Right. So she's there and I'm like, I got to get home. I have to get home. Well, whenever I passed by this chapel, there was 2 pews in this chapel. It was like an all faiths chapel. And I'd never done this. I got on my knees and I prayed to God and I said, God, just please get me home. Please get me home. Please get me home. Please get me. That's all I said over and over and over and over again. I was like, I know whatever I have to do, please just get me home. And so I got on my plane. I got to the Cincinnati airport, CVG, and they said, hey, your flight is delayed. It's gonna have to be till tomorrow. But I wasn't worried anymore. And I remember being like, why am I not in a hurry?
Because you were like, I want to go home. I want to go home.
And so I called my uncle and I said, hey, this is so crazy. I'm here right now, but I'm delayed until 8 p.m. tomorrow. Do you want to hang out? And he said, I'll be there in 10 minutes. We just got out of church. And so he comes and he picks me up. He takes me to dinner. And to backtrack on that song Oceans, as I was going through some hard stuff with my ex, she was not my ex yet. Gave away the story. But while I was going through some things with her, I had borrowed my buddy's acoustic guitar in the barracks. I didn't have one. And by ear, I'd been a musician for a long time, so I was playing Oceans in my barracks room.
Yeah.
Well, my roommate videotaped me, and he put it on Facebook. And he said, I never knew that this guy could sing. I've lived with him for years, you know? And he posted that to Facebook. He tagged me. It had gotten around to a lot of people who never knew that I even sang. My uncle watched it.
Oh, gosh.
And so while we were at dinner, he said, hey, I didn't know that you sang. I didn't know that you knew the Lord. I didn't know any of that. I don't know if this means anything to you, but I have this internship at my church. And I think that you could really grow and have do something that you kind of really enjoy here. And I said, no, I'm going home
to marry this girl.
And he's like, okay. And he's very patient, man. And he said, okay, if anything changes, you just need to know that you're always welcome here, and I want you here. And I was like, okay, well, thank you. That's awesome. So I got on the plane the next day, and he spoke a lot of life into me that I still think about some of those things to this day. I went home, and within 6 hours of being home, I found out that she had been in a relationship with someone else while I was gone. Well, what I had done leading up to this was I had gotten a home, furniture, because we were going to get married. So I'd like setting a place for us to be.
Oh my gosh.
With him. And I'm just this young guy. And that's really common in the military. Probably even more in the Marine Corps. It's a really common thing to happen. I just never thought it was going to happen to me.
Yeah.
But I had got us a home, got us furniture, got everything set up. Like it was going to be great. And she was asleep. She didn't know that I knew yet. And I called my uncle back, and I said, "You were right." And he said, "I'm so sorry." And this is probably 1:00 in the morning. And he just started crying on the phone with me.
Wow.
And it was so weird because I felt like I had known him for a long time, but we had not been close for most of my life.
Yeah.
And he's just crying on the phone with me. And he said, "Can I call you back in 5 minutes? But will you promise me that you won't move? Just stand where you are. Don't do anything." Because he was really worried I was going to make a bad decision.
Yeah.
And he's thinking, I'm a Marine. I'm going to go find this guy.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. And so he calls me back 5 minutes later, and he says, "I text you an address. I just need you to get whatever you can get. Grab your dog, throw it in your truck, drive to this address. This is a hotel. It's already paid for. They'll let your dog stay there. And then in the morning, I need you to drive to me. And by the time you get here, we'll be ready for you."
Oh, good grief.
And I was like, "Well, what am I supposed to do with everything else?" And he said, "I need you to trust me." And I said, "Okay." So I just packed up. my sea bags were still packed.
Yeah.
So I got my sea bags. I put them in my truck, got my dog, put them in a truck.
And at this point, you're out of the service.
Yeah.
You finished your stuff.
So I just transitioned I was going into the reserves at this point. And so she kind of wakes up while I'm leaving. I left in the middle of the night. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm leaving." She said, "Why?" I said, "Well, you cheated on me." And she said, "No, I didn't." And I said, "Yes, you did." And then she said, "How do you know?" And I told her how I found out. She started crying. She said, "Please don't leave. Please don't leave." And I said, I just think I have to leave. Please don't make this harder for me."
Yeah.
And she's crying. I just left it. I never saw her again.
And what about all your stuff?
I left it.
You just left it there.
I left everything I owned.
Wow.
And I got in the car and I went to this hotel, stayed there, got to the hotel, stayed the night there. Next morning I got up and I drove to Cincinnati with my dog. I still have a video of us and I look like I'm so happy, but I'm like completely self-destructing. I'm like road trip with the boys, like me and my Great Dane that I have. And I'm like, this is so cool, right? Everybody look at how happy, but I mean, I was in the darkest valley.
Yeah.
And I mean, I thought I was going to marry her.
Yeah.
I was in love with her. But I just couldn't rectify that.
Yeah.
It was such a betrayal. And so I got to Cincinnati. He had given me a bedroom in his basement, bought me a bed. And he's like, "I just want you to start coming to church with me." And
wow.
So I started attending church with him.
He wasn't pastoring that church at the time.
He was the senior pastor. Yeah. And he's still the senior pastor. But the church was a lot smaller.
Was it 7Hills?
Yeah.
Always 7Hills.
Well, so he took the church over, it's been 25 years, I think.
Oh.
Maybe 20, but it was Fellowship of Believers. Many years ago, it was a small church, a couple hundred people. And he was a young kid. He was in his 20s. And he took it over as a 28, 29-year-old. And he kind of
built it into what it is now.
Yeah. I would call him a church planner more than I would say he took over church, because there was nothing left.
Wow.
But when I got there, it was 7Hills. And it had been established at that point. There was a couple thousand people that were there. So, I went to church with him for a few Sundays. He kind of started showing me the ropes. Every single night, he would talk to me about Jesus. And every single night he would talk to me. And he would always encourage me, like, "Well, have you been singing? Have you been doing this? Have you been doing that?" I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I really want to do that. And I was planning like how I was going to leave. So I was thinking, I'm going to go be a firefighter, or I'm going to go do nursing or something, I don't know, whatever, some job that I can do that'll give me like fulfillment, but also I won't be completely poor and live in concrete anymore. And so I'm like planning my escape from this. And this is transitional for me. Like, thank you so much for allowing me to stay in your basement while I just figure out what's next. In my life. And then he kind of, I was really depressed. So I just wouldn't come out of my room, for days or something. Cause my heart was broken.
Right.
And so he got in his mind that what we should do is this mountain climbing trip. And so he had gotten, it was him, myself, and 3 guys from our CrossFit gym that we were going to. And they were buddies that we knew. And he had decided that this is going to be so good for Kaelob to get out and get away from everything. And it was such a great plan. And so he bought me all the gear, got me the poles, the bag, all the stuff. And we were going to go climb the mountain. It's the hardest 14er in Colorado. It's called Capitol Peak. So in like retrospect, because I do climb mountains now to this day still, probably should have started with something a little lighter, but that was the one that we were going to do. It's this, if you Google it, it's terrifying.
Wow.
But I was young. I literally felt like I was invincible. Also did not care if I died.
Well, you're a Marine too.
Yeah. And I just didn't think that my life had a lot of value at that time. I was like, well, I mean, what have I given to anybody? What have I done for anybody or anything? Yeah. And so we go on this trip, and one of the guys, his name is Travis, incredible guy, loved the Lord. He would get so upset anytime we would try to spend time on our phone, and we'd be looking for service. And he's like, guys, disconnect. Let's talk about the Lord. And, he just kept bringing up Jesus into the equation. And we're like, so annoying. This guy just wants to talk about the Lord so much. We're out here trying to text our friends.
Yeah. Like, we're on a mountain.
Yeah. And so he's an incredible guy. And so I remember a few different times I ended up getting in conversations with him, and he was really interested in my life. And my uncle had kind of given him some of my backstory. So everyone was like, really like, hey, how are you doing? Yeah. I was like, I'm good, guys. I'm fine. I'm good. And trying to be a tough guy. And Travis and I would talk a bunch of times. Well, that we had gotten up really early, probably like 3 a.m., hiked all day to the base of where we were going to summit the next morning at Capitol Peak. And so we were at this, it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. There's 2 mountains next to each other. There's Capitol Peak, and there's this mountain called Mount Christiana. They're right next to each other. And then in between them is this glacier lake. And it's below freezing, but it's not frozen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I remember having this moment when they're all jumping into the water being buffoons, just crazy. And I get in the water and it's so cold and it's like shaking my life.
Yeah.
But there was this calm and quiet. And I was like, whoa, there's something really important here. Maybe something really important about my life here. Like maybe it's going to be okay. Well, we're all setting up. We eat dinner. It's only like 4 or 5 o'clock, maybe 4:30. And Travis and his brother, they say, does anybody want to go play? And I'm like, yeah, let's go play. And so what we did was we crossed this valley kind of ravine thing. And we went to Mount Christiana and we started bouldering. We started looking for caves. And so we were looking for different caves, and we saw this one cave that we're like, let's go explore that cave. That'd be so cool. It was like 25 feet up. Not that crazy, but 25 feet is actually pretty high.
Yeah.
25 feet up.
Yeah.
And so we climbed 25 feet up, which was easy to climb up. But when we got there,
you didn't have your equipment with you.
Nope. So I had a jacket on, my hiking boots, and my hiking pants. I mean, and I think I had my beanie. That was it. And it was September, but it was cold.
Yeah.
It was cold up there. And so we were doing that. We got to the cave. The cave was nothing. There was nothing in it. And so we were like, well, maybe we'll get down. And we looked down. We're like, well, 25 feet, that's kind of scary. I wonder if there's a better way. Well, his brother had just gone down. And we're like, how did you do it? And he said, same way I came up. I'm like, no, that's not a really good option for us. We're going to go find another way down. We looked to the left, and we realized that, I'm not sure how far away, but it looked like there was a pretty gentle slope down. I'm like, well, we'll just scale it and go over there, and then we'll just kind of slip and slide or walk down. It looks really gentle. And so we decided that. We started scaling it, but the way we had to scale it, we had to kind of go up sometimes so we could keep going over, go up, to keep going over. Well, by the time we got there, what we realized was happening is there's this effect that the sun has on the mountain and the curvature of the mountain, and that it will make something that is this vertical look like it's at an angle because of the shadows and the reflection of the sun. And so when we got there, it was a vertical drop. Oh, and now we're 60, 70 feet up. And so what do? Now we're in a much worse, and going down is terrifying. To descend 5-10 feet is very scary. And so, okay, well, it's been kind of easy to climb up. There's got to be a trailhead at the top of this mountain. We'll climb down. So we look up, it looks like a really easy climb, and we'll just keep going. The same effect. The sun had gone down more, so now the reflection is on this, and so what looked like a really gentle was like that. Was vertical. And the problem with the mountains in Colorado is the higher you get up, the rock, they call it rotten. It gets flaky. Yeah. And so we started having to climb, and I mean, we're no joke rock climbing, and we're 250 with no equipment. And for me, I'm not worried yet, because the guy's not worried yet. I'm like, oh, we're good. This is just fun. We're having a good time. Well, then I realized, the first time I realized something was up was he started acting a little afraid. And he said, hey, we're going to have to climb separate paths because rock is starting to come out. And I don't want the rock to hit one of us if we're above the other. And I could just tell in his voice that something was wrong.
Do you even have shoes that have the spikes on them?
No, it's just hiking boots.
Yeah.
And so we're climbing, and I'm kind of starting to get a little worried. Well, when you're not scared, it's easy to climb. When you get scared, it gets hard.
Yeah.
You start second guessing yourself. You make mistakes.
Yeah.
And so I started getting really worried and taking too much time.
And you're above him.
And I'm beside him.
You're beside him.
So I'm a little higher, but he's here.
Yeah.
And we had been kind of doing this.
Yeah.
So we're going up the same path, but just in a different way.
Yeah.
And I was probably 7 inches taller than him. And so I remember him asking me, he's like, hey, how did you make that move? And I was like, I don't know. I just reached it. I just grabbed it. He's like, I don't think I can reach that. And I said, I don't know, maybe I'll have to find a different way. He's like, I think I'm going to have to find a different way. Well, we had established this rule that at any time while we were climbing, you had to have at least 3 points of contact on the mount. So just one hand can go somewhere, then your foot can go somewhere, but 3 points have to be holding it, because the rock was starting to kind of fall out from under us. And I was up, and the crazy thing was they could see us climbing from like a half a mile away. Maybe like there was a valley separating us, but they were on the top of this hill for camp. And then we were on the side of this mountain, and they could just see these little dots, kind of climbing up on the mountain.
Hey, everybody, this is Rita Springer. I have another great product that I am a firm believer in. Now, I am a water snob, and I can tell you that I haven't drank tap water in years. It's because I feel like it's unhealthy. It doesn't taste as good. And I spend a lot of money on expensive bottled water. I found a solution. Aquatru is a water purification system that is able to be used right on your faucet. It's a portable system. I don't know if a lot of you know this. I know I didn't know it, but 3 out of 4 homes in America have high contaminants in our tap water. There's a research that's been done by an environmental group called Environmental Work Group, and they have discovered that even the PFASs, there are 45% of our tap water is contaminated. And so this is a great solution. I'm offering an incredible deal for that today. You get a 30-day money-back guarantee and 20% off of your purchase at aquatru.com. And all you have to do is go to Aquatru, that's AQUATRU.com, aquatru.com. And the promo code for your discount is going to be Rita, Rita. Here's what you're going to get with Aquatru. You're going to get great tasting water. You're going to get water that's good for your children. You're going to get water that's amazing for your pets as well. And it's also a portable system. So if you're renting a house on vacation, you could take that system with you. Or if your kids are off in college, you can actually even give it to your kids to take to their dorms. So go to Aquatru.com. That's AQUATRU.com. And you can type in the promo code Rita, Rita, to get a 30-day money-back guarantee with 20% off today and start drinking better water.
We were climbing and I just heard him say, I think I'm falling.
Oh,
and
gosh.
I turned and I looked and I saw him and he had grabbed both of his hands on a rock and it had come out. It was a bowling ball size of a rock. And I turned and I looked and I saw him look at me and he tried to push the rock out from in front of him. But by the time he got it, he was too far away from the wall. He couldn't grab, so he missed it when he went to grab the wall again and he fell. And at that point we were 270 feet and he died. I mean, it was as brutal as you can imagine.
And you're stuck on the mountain just watching this happen.
And I'm frozen. And because they could see us,
they knew he had fallen.
They knew someone had fallen. But what had happened was I'd given him my jacket.
And your uncle thought
so
it
my
was
uncle
you.
Screams. And I can hear him scream from half a mile away. It's to this day I can hear every part of that scream. And it's this pure terror.
Yeah.
And then I watch them run and sprint as fast as they can. And my uncle is calling my name. And I start saying, oh, I'm here. And he said, how are you talking to me? Are you okay? I said, I'm here. I'm good. I'm okay. And he said, I can't believe you're okay. So he still thinks that I've survived.
Well, he's running to try to find you.
He thinks that I've survived and that I must just be in this horrible. And what I know, because I can see it, there's no chance that he's alive. And I'm so frozen. I can't move. But the problem is, if you've ever rock climbed, my foot was stuck in a crack to kind of take the weight off my arms. But I still had to have the weight on my hands, and my forearms are on fire. And he gets there. He covers that half mile. And I don't know. It was so fast. And the other guys with him, and they realized that I'm up there still and that Travis had fallen. And he said, you can't move. You can't move. Don't move. Just stay still. We'll find a way to get you down. And I said, Marcus, I have to move. I can't stay here. I'm going to fall because my hands are shaking and my fingers are numb and I don't know what to do. And I've told this part of the story a bunch of times, and I'm never trying to over spiritualize it, but I closed my eyes and I opened my eyes 10 feet higher in a new position. Oof. I don't remember what I did. Wow. I don't remember the climb. I don't remember the maneuver. I don't know how I got. I could never tell you. But now my back is to the wall and my arms are on two jutting rocks and my foot is wedged between these two rocks that have a crack in it. And I'm trying to take the weight off of my body and my arms. And I would just switch my arms over and over to shake out the lactic acid in my triceps. And they started trying to call. Whenever the brother and his best friend find out that it's Travis, there's a whole new set of tears and crying and screaming. And this man's brother has died. And they know he's gone. And then is somebody calling for an ambulance? Is there cell service? So they had to try to hike to a place where they would have service.
Oh my gosh.
So they had to search for service to get to a place. So they didn't even know where service was going to be. They just knew they had to try to get as high as possible without climbing a mountain, obviously. And so they're climbing and I'm just up there and I hear everything because everything, even
Is
though
below you.
it's all below me, but it's traveling up the wall. So I can hear everything that the brother is saying to him, that the best friend is saying to him. And I'm like, my heart is just shattering. And I don't know and I'm so scared and I don't know what to do. But I think if it had never happened, I would have just kept climbing. But now I've watched this man die, and I can't move anymore.
Well, and you're at the end of the day, so the sun's going down.
Right.
It's going to be dark soon.
Yeah.
And you're going to be left on that mountain.
Right. And so they eventually were able to get a hold of Mountain Rescue. And Mountain Rescue's like, well, we're just going to get there when we're going to get there. We don't know when we'll get there. Oh my God. And in my head, and they're telling me this, they're yelling up at me. They're like, we got a hold of them. They're going to try to come. And I'm like,
try to come.
What does that mean? I don't know how much time I have.
Oh my God.
Because I'm shifting my weight around.
Right.
And it could be a few hours, probably minimum, maybe 12, 13 hours. And you're right, it's about to get dark. And if you've ever been mountain climbing, you know that the higher you get, the more exposure you have. The wind is just beating you the whole time. So I'm freezing cold without my jacket.
Because you've given him your jacket.
Yeah. And can't feel my fingers. I can't feel my toes. I can't feel anything. My arms are aching. And it was in this moment that I'm up there, I had just decided that I was going to die.
Wow.
And I was only fighting for as much time left as I could have. So my last time on earth was going to be on this mountain. And I'm just trying to buy myself minutes at this point. Like, okay, I'm alive for this many more minutes. Like, what am I going to think about? It was like hyperbolic, but I'm like, I don't know how to think about life because it's about to be over. And I've not ever been in a good enough standing with the Lord to really believe I'm going to heaven.
Yeah.
And so I remember praying. I remember I don't even know if I can say praying, but I think it's praying. I just started talking to God, same way I had when I was a kid. And it was the most surreal thing because I felt like he was just sitting on the mountain right next to me and just talking to me. And I remember saying, like, God, I just know that I haven't been what I'm supposed to be or haven't done what I'm supposed to do. And I don't expect you to save me, so I'm not here to make a deal. I'm not saying if you save me, I'm not saying any of that. I'm not even asking you to because I don't even know if I deserve it. But I just wanted to talk to you while I'm here. And I just remember feeling this, like, I'd always thought of prayer as this like voicemail system. Like I'll call God, I'll leave a voicemail.
And he'll somehow get back with me.
And get through it. All right, I'm gonna check Caleb's voicemail. All right, cool. He called today, great. But it was the first time that I had experienced prayer as just a conversation.
Yeah.
And I remember him like really repeating to me all the things that my uncle had been talking to me in those weeks leading up to it. And it was, hey, God doesn't look at you the way that you think he looks at you, because you think that your representation of a father is an abusive one, a disregarding one. He's intentional and he's there, and I'm here. And I remember just kind of as I don't know if it sounds cheesy or not, but I remember just starting to sing, and I started singing this song. And it was the melody of the first song I ever wrote for 7Hills Worship.
Wow.
And it was from the love chapter. And I just remember saying, like, your love keeps no record of wrongs. Like, your love keeps no record of wrongs. And yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so I felt him, and I told him, I said, God, I'm not asking for a deal here.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to give everything to you.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what you want me to do now. If I get down, that's what's going to happen. So I'll just always trust that you're going to show me the things that you want me to do.
Yeah.
I'll follow it. So please give me good signs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they were able to come. And so a helicopter came.
Before it got dark?
No, it was dark.
It was dark.
Yeah. And so I got into hypothermia. I actually experienced rhabdo. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of that. So it's whenever your lactic acids build up so much, it poisons you.
Oh my goodness.
Because my arms had been in, but I mean, luckily I had just been in the military. And so I was physically fit enough to survive this. But the funny thing was, in my brain, I thought that they were going to show up with a helicopter with like a rope and like dangled a rope in front of me. And then I was going to grab the rope and they were just going to like fly me down.
Yeah.
That's not how they save
How
people.
do they do it?
So they like volunteers. These guys
Mountain
are all
climbed
volunteers.
up to you.
Volunteer mountain climbers came up and they climbed up there.
In the dark.
In the dark.
Lighting up
with headlights. And they're literally, and they're saying to me, how did you climb this? Like, how did you climb this without gear? And I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, this is an impressive climb.
Yeah.
We have gear and it's not, but like, how did you do this? And I was like, I don't know. And they're like, this was a dumb idea, by the way.
Yeah.
And I remember them saying, I could hear them at the bottom of the mountain saying, hey, we're not gonna be able to get him tonight. We're gonna be able to go up and take a blanket to him because we think he has hypothermia. But we're gonna have to get him in the morning when the light comes. And I could hear them say that. And I yelled down to them. I was like, guys, I'm not gonna be here in the morning. So you can decide that. I don't want you to do something that risks your life, but I'm not. I could feel that the rocks were kind of shifting.
Oh yeah.
A little bit. And so I knew I had an hour, maybe 2 hours. And so they climbed. And I mean, I don't remember I don't even know their names. I wish I did. And I wish I sent them a Christmas card every year, but I never knew. And so they climbed up. They had exactly enough rope to get me down. If I had been higher, they couldn't have saved me. I would have had to come down to get saved.
So did you have to grab a rope and follow them down?
So this is the crazy, they looped their rope around just a rock, not with like a hook or anything. It was just around a rock. That's it. There was nothing else holding it there. And one of them at the bottom belayed me down and they put a harness on me from the rope. And I just had to trust that rock wasn't going to fall out of the mountainside while I belayed down.
This is a freaking movie. It's like a stinking movie. Good night.
Whenever I got to the bottom, I belayed right next to Travis's body. And I saw him.
And they hadn't taken him out yet.
They hadn't. And they don't do that. So they don't take him with the helicopter. What they do is they send in like a team like with horses, and the horses come in and this team comes and grabs the body and they bring it. And so I got down.
He would have died on impact.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think he died before he hit because he hit before he hit the ground. So he hit something else. And so it was instant from my viewpoint. And if it wasn't instant, it was the very next second. And so I remember seeing him, never being able to have that image leave my mind because he was unrecognizable at that point. And then I ran across the ravine to my uncle. We cried. He hugged me. And
Didn't you go to the hospital?
No. So basically what happens is, so it was the middle of the night. It was like 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
So they said, it's not safe. They couldn't take us in the helicopter. The helicopter dropped the mountain climbers off. So the mountain climbers actually stayed in our tent with us that night. And so we had to sleep in our tent together while Travis's body was still there.
Oh.
And
Kaelob, this is horrifying.
And you could hear the volunteers, they used their sat phones and they called their wives and they said they were okay. And so I had like this guilt in me for like endangering these men and doing that. And then hearing the brother cry all night long. And my uncle just wouldn't let me go. And he's I'm so glad you're okay. I'm so glad you're okay.
My gosh.
I'm so glad you're okay. And so we eventually, I think I might have slept for 1 minute. I think I passed into sleep for 1 minute at one point, and then I was just awake. And as soon as the sun came up, we got up, we packed up our stuff. We hiked back out the way we came in. And we
Was the brother just catatonic?
He didn't talk. Yeah, didn't talk hardly. I mean, I think he said.
And he had to leave his brother's body there.
And we passed the horses.
Oof.
As we left, the horses passed us, so we knew where they were going and what they were going to do.
Yeah.
And it was the quietest. I mean, it was 6 hours for us to hike back to our car, and it was the quietest 6 hours of my whole life. And in all of it, though, I remember.
Was he married and had a family, or was he?
So that was the harder part. Was he was married, he had 2 children on his own, and they had just adopted 2 little girls.
Oh my God.
Young girls. And I mean, this guy was an incredible man, just loved the Lord and was a good person. And so this whole time,
and the whole time he's been trying to talk to you about the Lord.
Yeah. And we're just disregarding it. And I'm thinking to myself, why didn't I fall? I don't have anything. Like nobody is relying on me.
So you must have struggled with a bit of survivor's guilt.
For a few years, I definitely did. Yeah. And all of it, like the funny thing is a lot of I guess none of it's funny, but my memories of it now, I remember some of the scenes of like what I saw on the mountainside. And I remember them as beautiful now, which is really interesting. But I mean, every year I think about it. I think about and it was every day I thought about it.
Yeah.
And every moment I thought about it. And then it was every week and then every month. And now it's been, so this is the 10th year since the mountain. And I have a trip to go climb that mountain this year. For 10 years of, I don't know, there's something poetic about it. But we got home. We had to talk to an investigator about it. Anytime somebody dies, they have to investigate it. And then I was, post-traumatic stress is probably the best way I could describe it.
I can imagine.
For years after that. And it triggered like a lot of like anything that I was dealing with really well from my childhood, it like made that unmanageable, if that makes sense. So some of that stuff that I had gone through was like, why is this affecting me so much? Why am I so much more offended at this thing? Why? Like I've never really cared. Like why? So it kind of broke me wide open. But I remember my promise. And so I had told God, I'm going to do this thing. And
so you're staying in Cincinnati at the church. You don't go back. You don't move. You stay committed there, walking through all this trauma out with your uncle. Did you get good counseling?
I was kind of like counseling aversion for a long time. And I didn't want to talk to anybody about it.
Well, that's kind of a Marine.
I was like, I'm good.
And
anybody who asked me, I was like, I'm fine. I'm okay. But this is where songwriting just became such medicine to me.
Wow.
And I started.
You're not the worship leader yet, though, in those years.
No, I'm an intern.
But you're cultivating as an intern.
And so I had written this song called Record of Wrongs, the first song that we ever wrote as a church. And it was all about that. And whether no one will ever know that it was about that, but that was what it was about to me. And they, my uncle had it, let us play it, for a Sunday. And he kind of told a little bit of the backstory, and the church just grabbed onto it. And they're like, we love this song and we love this story. And that was where I was fortunate, because the very first song that we did was something that was tied to something real, and the church championed it. And so I didn't have
came out of an authentic life circumstance.
And so I remember being like, oh, well, we should keep doing this. We should keep writing more songs. And so I just started writing more songs. And it was the way, I hate to say, I kind of like buried myself in it to avoid dealing with everything else, or that was just how I would deal with it.
It became your weapon to deal with it.
And so I just started writing and writing. And then within a couple years, I got married. I met my wife just months after that, which I wasn't ready for a relationship even. But she was perfect for me, and after that, we were married, and then we got pregnant with our first child. And within 7 weeks, 8 weeks of our first scan, we found out she had Down syndrome. And I remember exploding in tears. And I said, God, I am not even down from the mountain yet. I can't climb it again. I don't think I can do it again. Like, why are you doing this to me? And I was like, I've just given you everything. I'm giving you everything I have. I gave up everything for you. Why are you doing this? And then I started getting mad at him. I was like, why did you? I already went through this with my dad. I already went through this with my mom. My life has been horrible, and I still love you. Why are you doing this to me? And I just had this, like, I wasn't mad. I mean, I was mad at him, but I wasn't, I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it. I wanted to be mad at somebody.
It's almost like, it sounds like, they talk about the stages of grief. It almost sounds like during that incident, all of a sudden it triggered, and then the finding out that your daughter has Downs, it's like it almost triggered all these experiences of grief that had been there for years that you never really even.
Yeah. And like right as one scab is healing,
it's
cut
like
me open again. And so I buried myself in writing again. So I wrote a song called Found to Love. And Found to Love is about my daughter.
Yeah.
Every song is about the Lord, but it comes from something, right? There's a story behind every song I've written. And that was the song that kind of really started 7Hills Worship on more of a trajectory of being a bigger thing than just songs that we write on for Sunday. And that was the song that actually like exposed Stacy Wilbur to me. She heard it the first day that it released.
So you guys weren't like the typical, we're a church and we're going to be a songwriting culture. The literal essence of your songs came from this experience.
Yeah.
That's, I think, what, when you mentioned that in the room, I was like, okay, that's a whole different ball of wax. Then it's because the primary thing of what churches record for is because they're the church and their worship is so cool. And we're going to start a songwriting culture. Yeah. But you did it as a way to survive.
Yeah, just process.
And process through what was unbearable. Hey, everybody, this is Rita Springer. Thank you so much for coming in and joining me on the podcast here with Worship is My Weapon. There's a lot of things I'm doing right now. And one of the things that we provide alongside this podcast is a newsletter that we send out to those of you that are subscribed, where I just answer questions and kind of give you information. And sometimes you guys are able to write in with questions that you just are curious about. We love that. We love that interaction. I actually love to interact with those of you that want something a little bit more beyond the podcast. So if that's you, make sure to get our newsletter, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the newsletter, and stay in touch with all the things that we're doing here on the podcast in that newsletter.
Yeah. And I remember my uncle when I was writing songs, like when I first wrote Record of Wrongs, I sent it to him and it was basically just the scripture. And he said, I think you could do better than that. Like, I think you could say this in a way that hasn't been said before. And I remember him kind of challenging me in that way. He's like, if you're going to write, then do it your way.
Yeah.
Like, write. Don't try to be a way. And it was so encouraging. He always has been a really great champion of that. And we were just writing from stories. And, then someone's going through cancer in our church or something. We're like, well, tell me about it. Because I've experienced like that too. Maybe we could talk about it. And maybe that's a song. But it's never like no song we've ever released. And this is probably a fault to me as well.
Yeah.
I've never been able to write because I needed something, like I needed songs for the record.
Yeah.
Or I needed songs for a release. And our rule is literally, we're going to write as long as it's fun, as long as we enjoy it. And if we don't, I'm not going to write it.
Right.
There's no, I just don't care to be.
Yeah. When it becomes a job or becomes a priority or becomes something that creates the distraction instead of becomes a distraction.
Yeah.
A holy distraction.
It's so easy to do that. And I talk to churches and friends at other churches all the time, and they talk about what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing? I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
It's just the songs for us.
Yeah.
The song is the most important thing. Obviously, we steward, the church is the thing that makes it all possible, and the leadership is the thing. And I'd love, I do have to give honor to my uncle because he's allowed me to do all this. But that is never mattered. To be something or to be
How are you keeping your team in check? Because you're pastoring a team that's seeing the rising success without having some of these deep experiences in circumstance to understand that this is just so cool. There are some of them on the cool vibe where you have to be like, no, we're not doing this for any other reason than.
I mean, I think that a lot of people would relate that there probably are a lot of people on their teams that are that way. And they want to. I think God has blessed us in a lot of ways. We have the people that come in and they have expectations.
Yeah.
And they are always welcome. But for me, I'm like, yeah, you can absolutely be a part of our team, and we're writing. But just because you wrote a song doesn't mean it's going to be on the
Right.
album. And what I'll always say to them is like, I just really feel like this is a you song. I think you should release this song for you.
Yeah.
And I'll help you. I'll teach everything I have in my disposal.
To help you do it, I'll do it.
So if you're passionate, because that's the thing that happens is I think we disregard people's feelings sometimes as churches. Someone comes with a song and it is important to them and it's special to them, and it maybe just doesn't maybe align at that time with what we're doing, but it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's not a no from me at this time. Maybe right now it is, but not forever. Or we're an impatient people, right? So if you really love this, let me help you.
Yeah.
Let me
so you can
find a
just
way.
release it. Yeah.
Yeah. I have friends. I have producer friends and writing friends and mix engineer friends, and I will help you find everybody you need, and it will probably not even cost you anything if it's that important to you. But for me,
It's not for our project.
That's not telling our story right now.
Right.
And the story is everything for
Yeah.
us. So like every one of our albums has a story connected to
And
it.
are you the one seeking God in the season for like, okay, what's the next thing? What do you want to say in the next thing? And then building upon that storyline?
Usually.
Yeah.
And I think like sometimes it's like I'll hear, my uncle say something in a sermon and I'm like,
Yeah. That'd be a great song.
that's a beautiful song.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
like, and he's really graceful to like allow me to tell the story.
Yeah.
Right. Cause I think a lot of senior pastors they really want to be involved in every aspect of that.
Yeah.
And he's kind of given us the freedom because he knows that we care about it and that we're going to steward it well. We've earned his trust. But a lot of times it comes to me in like a poem or a thought. So the first live album we did was called Finding Love. And it was centered around the idea of what Found a Love was about. And so even though Found a Love was about my daughter, it was also about, hey, there are a lot of people who maybe are just now realizing and finding out about God. And this album is for them.
Yeah.
This album is for the people finding God, not the ones who just known him forever.
Yeah.
And they can probably be blessed by it, but I'm not so worried about pleasing every single person. I want to write for a specific thing right now, because I learned pretty early on that if I tried to write for everybody, I would write for nobody.
Right.
And so there's always somebody in mind. There's a person or there's an experience or something. And so every song was in that way. We did, most recently we did The Looking Glass is what came out in the fall, and The Looking Glass and the album, the studio album right before that was called Like Poetry. And Like Poetry is my favorite thing we've ever done.
Wow.
Because the album got the title Like Poetry from a song title, but I thought, all these songs they're not really like Sunday songs. They're like, they're like poetry.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, like poetry.
Like poetry.
Yeah, great. This would be a cool album title. And so there's a song on the Like Poetry album, and it's called Like Poetry. And that was a poem that I just put a melody to. And I had written that poem one day, and I felt like God was just downloading all these things to me. And I was like, wouldn't it be really cool if we wrote an entire album based on this thought, this poem? Like, what if we read it before every single song that we wrote? And we don't have to write about it.
Yeah.
But like we're influenced by
this poem.
Yeah. And so every single song, almost, like -2, I think, there's a line from the Like Poetry song in that song.
Interesting.
There's something or a variation of it because we took all these pieces.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, I know if I go into a co-write, it's like, hey, I know we can write about whatever, but I just committed that I'm going to read this poem before every song that we write. And if it sparks anything in you, great. If it doesn't, that's fine.
Yeah. But
I feel like God is asking me to write this. And so I would read them to him and they would say, okay, maybe. Or they would be moved by a line and they're like, well, let's write
about that.
Let's write that. And so everything has kind of had that a little bit. There's like a singularity to it, or a story. And I don't know, like I love to tell stories. So even though we release, like if you look at the cadence of 7Hills worship, we release a lot of singles.
Yes.
I don't consider it like a single. I say, well, we're releasing an album over time.
Right.
I'm releasing a whole album over time. You can call it whatever you want, but it's all going to be part of the same story.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. Did that answer your question?
So, okay, so you're here now. Obviously, too, how old's your daughter now?
She's 6.
She's 6, and she's actually been the biggest blessing in your entire life.
She's awesome.
You were talking about her in the song, right?
Yeah.
And you have a couple other kids.
Yep. So I've got a 4-year-old. His name is River. My daughter's name is Adeline. River is my 4-year-old. And then I just had another son. He's 5 months old now. His name is Judah.
And what has Adeline taught you most about being a father?
Patience.
Yeah.
But I think with any kid with special needs, it's you grow a really big capacity for love.
Yeah.
And empathy and understanding, because I see it in everything now.
Yeah.
So Down syndrome is really beautiful to me. And she is exactly who she is.
Yeah.
And I love it. And she resonates on the same frequency as me. I say that.
Yeah.
I'm like, if there's a thing that us as people, we have this frequency, she's the same. And I love my boys as well, but Addie she's my person.
And why do you think she came first? Have you ever talked to the Lord about what was it that she has that in that season of trauma and season of all this stuff was actually the healing part to you? Because when you say that, I'm like, it feels like this, but the reality of it is God knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah, I think that my life, I'm a relatively goofy guy. You know,
Yeah.
you've known me, you've seen my text messages or whatever, you know that I'm a joker.
Yeah.
So I like that, but I'm internally haven't been that. That's an external expression of combating, the other stuff. And so joy was this like joy piece was missing from my life. And my wife is hilarious and she's awesome, but there wasn't this like thing. And I think that God gave us Adeline, to get our minds off of ourselves, because then we had to take care of her.
Yeah.
Then we're in the hospital and we were in the NICU for months.
Wow.
And she had a lot of needs. She was on oxygen. And then I think he was trying to prove to me, watch how I'm going to change your perspective about something.
Interesting.
Watch how you thought this was a horrible situation, and watch me show you that this is the greatest thing I could have done for you. And it made me realize that God, we think that these things that happen to us, God, I'm never going to survive from this. And God said, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I'm doing this for you.
Yeah.
This is, just trust me, and don't do it on your timeline. Trust me on mine. And within, a 6 months to a year, Addie is a goofball.
Yeah.
And then she's my joke buddy.
Yeah.
And she does fart jokes with me now.
Yeah.
She's so funny, and she's such a troll. She'll crawl into our bed and she'll say, Daddy, 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 Daddy. She'll wake me up. And I say, yeah, Addie, what? And she said, poopy. Like that kind of stuff. And I have to laugh.
Yeah.
And so she's just like, everything about her is just proof of God. She's proving me wrong. Yeah. Essentially, like, hey, you thought this about this.
It's just listening to you. I think what I find kind of really beautiful about your life is that nothing that you said has made your life look, sound, or feel easy. But you also didn't talk about even the journey with your mom with great regret or disdain or bitterness, or which would be a very normal response to that.
Yeah.
Very validating if we're to talk to somebody and say, yeah, I had a hard life. This happened. This. I was like, yeah, man, how did you even, of course you're a drug addict. Of course you're this.
Yeah.
But you're not, that's not your story.
Yeah.
Even though your story is pretty tragic, you almost needed that storyline to keep the position of your progression into where the Lord was taking you, so that you could fall in line with exactly how he wanted you to come out of it, with the perspectives. And I do think that's important, because people miss that. When you have a harder story than somebody else, and you've maintained a relationship with Jesus, there are people that haven't had that harder story, or maybe some that have, that didn't have the perspective. And so you look like you're a foreign object to them.
Yeah.
Because circumstances, like, yeah, that's a part of life. But to somebody that carries a bit more religion around him, it's like, well, God can look almost like he hates us because he allows what he allows. Yeah. And then there are people that are like, I'm never going to trust God because I don't want to have anything bad happen in my life. Like that kind of a thing. There's all these kind of ramifications, but it's a very rare thing that you have the story that you have. And you almost have this beautiful, delicate journey of being like choosing along the way to choose a better insight to it in the moment and getting through it, even though you would say things like, I'm never going to live in concrete housing again. It's an internal thing that you're like, I promise myself, I'm going to get out of here. But it's not like you're like traumatized by concrete housing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's actually quite beautiful that God used a guy that didn't even realize that he was going to become a worship leader and a worship pastor and write songs that thousands and thousands of people, none of that's in your history. It's in your pain. It's in your fight. It's in a mountain climb and the loss of a friend. It's in survival. It's in those things. And there was no piano around or guitar around in those moments. Yeah. And I find that fascinating because I think it's such a powerful element to show people how God moves and how he works. Yeah. And if you give him the moment of your life of question, if you give him, hey, I'm going to die on this mountain, so I'm not bargaining with you. I just want to talk.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If you give him, I would hate to say that it had to take that moment, but for some reason with you, that moment had to be there for you to get off that mountain and start your journey. And I just find it so encouraging for other people, especially people, if you're watching this, that are still circling the mountain or circling the roundabout with, I don't know if I can trust in God because of these circumstances or because of these triggers or because of these things. And it's like, I don't think God caused the triggers.
Right.
I think God uses the triggers to actually get us off the mountain.
Yeah.
And until we allow God that beautiful invitation and routing, then I think we're always going to have God somewhere that he's not supposed to be. Yeah. And I just think it's so, I don't know, it's just so brave of you to, and it's so, Kaelob, even like to me, just even the worship side of it with, this is not the normal thing you find in the storyline of how a church's worship starts.
Yeah.
And it's so stunning to me because I'm sitting here thinking, what is God doing with 7Hills that's different than what he's done with every other church? And this is something you almost can't chart this, write it up and say, hey, churches, find your trauma triggers and start a worship culture on that. Yeah. That's not going to be the norm. But I do think it's really good advice to worship leaders and people in the worship field in the church around worship leaders that just are like, what is actually going on that you're not telling the story that is probably the storyline of your church?
Yeah.
And stop centering on writing what you think you're supposed to be writing on.
Yeah, please don't do that.
Because other people have already written it.
Right.
So we're just chewing the cud of what cows have already thrown up.
Yeah.
It's like, write what's going on and see if that hits your church culture, or listen to what the church is saying. How many people are dealing with cancer? We know that in churches, right? When you're on staff at churches, you're like, there's something happening right now with financial, problems with people and provision and healing and blah, blah, blah. There's those things that come in and out of the church based on how the congregation feels. Where do you, like, in your head, what is your greatest, like, what would be your greatest warning for us to just like personally to be like, don't ever shy away from this. Don't ever shy away from this, because you never know what's a hidden door behind that, the God's.
I think that I think that worship leaders and songwriters in churches are really afraid to venture into authenticity sometimes.
Why do you think that is?
I think that there might be miscommunication sometimes.
From leadership?
So I think that it goes two ways. And usually when I talk to another church, the very first question I ever ask them is, hey, how bought in is your senior pastor? How bought in is your senior pastor? Oh, he knows, he's cool with it. Okay, we probably don't need to talk. Like maybe you come back another time.
Yeah.
Or he's letting us do it. Oh, okay. It's never going to work.
Yeah.
It's never going to work.
Yeah. You
look at anything anywhere that it's actually like able to grow, it has to have a lot of support from the top. So get on the same page with that person, or else it's just not going to happen. Because if you do it without there being a level of communication and understanding between the two of you, there's going to be miscommunication and misses and weird tensions that start to build. And like, why are we doing this? Why are you doing that? What? I didn't know. Boom, 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 boom. And obviously we have like a really awesome relationship with our pastor, and luckily he's my family. So I'm able to say things to him like, hey, here's the song. Let me text it to you. And so it's less weird. But in a lot of other churches that are trying to build up a worship, this is another instance. I had somebody text me the other day, hey, can I call you? I wanted to talk to you about, we want to start releasing some of our worship music. I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, call me. I'm driving home. And they called me and they said, yeah, our pastor came in and they said we want to have worship music now. And I was like, oh, okay. Why? I don't know. They just felt it, and we want to release our music now. I'm like, okay, well, two types of releases. Do you want to release it so the people that are there on Sunday can hear it? Or are you trying to be a voice outside of just your church? We want to be a voice. Why? I don't know. I mean, so because every church should be writing songs, but that's where the thing comes, because there have been these churches that have had massive success, and and for some reason we want to emulate a lot. And so,
but are we emulating the success? Are we trying to steal what another church was given because we think it's part of what we should be doing? Because someone wrote the book or someone wrote a manuscript that said,
it's exciting.
And I'm like, the language of what is God doing in your city? I'm not sure. How can you not know what God's doing in your city if you planted a church there?
Yeah, what are the stories?
It's like, and I that's what I find frustrating that you must hear a lot of is this.
The basis of it, the start of it can't be that ever. It
never works.
It never works. And they'll release, and this is no shade at anybody who's ever done this. This is just what I've seen now. Is we released an album. Well, nobody listened to it. Why didn't anybody listen to it? I was like, well, your people probably listened to it. It's kind of beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, but nobody else did. I was like, well, nobody else listened to it because you didn't even write it for the people in your church. God blesses that. If you write songs to bless the people that you're currently shepherding or caring for, God blesses that. And usually, if you're writing stories that singing songs about things that like, oh, this person is having this kind of thing, or this great joy and triumph came out of this season for our this family or our church or whatever. Let's sing about something really beautiful. And it doesn't always have to be sad or traumatic. But it's real. And when it's real, that automatically becomes more accessible to other people outside of your four walls. And it was so funny because I remember when we were first releasing some of our songs, I remember people saying to me, hey, this isn't really worship. And I said, well, like, what about it isn't worship? Well, it doesn't sound like Sunday stuff. Oh, okay. Well, like if we sang it on Sunday, would that make it Sunday? Oh, I mean, at your church, sure. Okay, cool. And then it would go really, really well sometimes. Maybe not always, but I started to realize that like we just put like all these walls on songs. And worship music as a whole, or Christian music as a whole, is fitting an infinite thing in a very finite box. And that's what makes it really, actually, some people will say, and this, I have a problem with this. So if you said this to me, talking to you. But some people will say, well, worship music or Christian music is the easiest music to write. I said, well, if you're not trying, Sure.
Yeah. If you're using AI, sure.
Yeah. Yeah. AI can write a worship
Yeah.
song or a Christian song. And maybe that'll be like really cool for certain groups of people. But there's a difference and there's a life and there's a spirit to it. But if you really want to write something authentic, it's kind of hard to say something. You don't have to say something fresh, but say something real.
Yeah.
And not be afraid of saying something real. And so, sorry that I called you. You know who you are. And so I think that, oh man, I just lost my train of thought with all that. But for you to know that like, this isn't just, you're not just writing songs with no weight.
Right.
And they have to be about things that you feel.
Right.
And then God will breathe on it or he won't. But you also have to not expect that at all. And that was the greatest blessing that we experienced was we didn't ever care.
Yeah. That reminds me of the 15-year-old at camp, Christian camp, that said, it's about him, right?
Yeah.
And you having that realization, oh yeah. It is all about him.
And then if you take, now this would be some of my greatest advice to a worship leader or worship songwriter at a church writing for their church. If you can write out of a place where you don't care if anybody ever listens to it other than God or the people you care about in your congregation, you're going to write some of those beautiful songs. But the second you start worrying about monthly listeners and the second you start worrying about stream count or whether or not you're the cover of a playlist. And I've found myself being really excited about that when we've gotten like a playlist cover. I'm like, oh, how cool is this, right? And then being like, why is it cool? God doesn't care about playlists.
No,
covers.
He didn't even think twice about it.
Yeah. Okay. Good job.
Yeah.
Whatever. And if in any season where I found myself starting to value those things, the songs that come out of us are horrible.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I'm like, why aren't our songs doing well?
Right.
What is it about? Go back. And it's so cliche. Everybody says that, but go back.
Yeah.
To the thing. Stop worrying about what culture is telling you about these things, what the trend is. Because if you're in church, trends are Enneagram and this thing and all these. They come and they go and they whatever all the time. But the worship, authentic worship is you could write the song now, and if it's real, in 20 years, it still has the same effect.
Yeah.
If it's real.
And
so, yeah, I don't know if that's any sort of
I love
advice.
that. Hey, everybody, I want to take a minute to talk to those of you and encourage those of you who maybe you're planting a church, you're on staff at a church, you're in the children's department of a church, and you run and oversee the curriculum at your kids' division of church. There is some friends of mine that have developed this curriculum that I just think it's the best curriculum for kids' church out there. It's called Amazing Kids. It is a Bible-based, spirit-filled curriculum. I know these guys, they are incredible creatives. Connie and Tyler Bates are the genius behind this, and they just love serving kids and serving God in serving our kids. If this is something that your church is looking for, if it's something that you as a pastor of your children's department is looking for, an enriched Bible-based curriculum to bring to your children's department of your church or your church plant, this is something that I would highly recommend that you do. I fully believe and back what these guys do. My own kid was under it for years, and it's just the way that they're doing it right now is just beautiful. So you can find all that information if you go to amazing.kids, and there's a kind of a special discount code that you can get, or a promotional code that you can get if you type in Rita in the promotional area of that, and they'll give you special pricing on that. But it's something that I just highly recommend. And kids are so important. They're so important in our churches. What we do when we drop our kids off in church and what's happening in the Sunday school area is so important for your children. And this curriculum is one of the best, and you will love it for your church. So check that out. It's incredible, and I back it 100%. Okay, so let me ask you one more question here about you personally. when you think about 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what do you say? I want to be doing that. I would love to be doing that. Do you think like that?
I do. I think there's a part of me that has to be structured because, like Parable of the Talents, like I don't want to be mismanaging what God is giving us.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, God, I don't want to just be bad about the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
He's allowing growth and he's allowing exposure to more things. And so, okay, God, well, does this mean that we should do this thing or the other thing? And
yeah,
we've had conversations with labels and that none of that has like really triggered me yet.
Yes.
Or registered that that's the right thing.
Yeah.
I think for some, it could be the right thing. It could not be, depending on the season. I don't know yet. I'm usually waiting for God to say something to me. And it's funny that it's January and we're having this conversation because it's every January we do a prayer and fast. For 21 days. Of course, every church does. A lot of church does, right? But every church does. Yeah, they're like, I'm on a fast. I'm like, okay, we all do that, right? We do at the movies too.
Is it over now? It's usually over by the 21st.
Oh yeah, ours is in October or something like that. Anyway, so we do, but I've always asked God, and it's usually like not just to give me direction. It's like, God, you still want me to do this? Like I'll just stop. God, do you still want me to write music for the church or for you?
Yeah.
Do you still want me to do this? Like I'm always going to write music for you, but do you still want me to do it in this way? And he usually shows me somehow, and it's not always quick. Sometimes I got to be patient with it,
Yeah.
But I think he usually answers me, and so I'm not 5-10 years planned ahead, but I'm careful to not try to like over make this thing something that it's not ready to be yet.
Yeah.
Where I think we have to go on tour and we have to do all these things, and like, why? I don't want to tour.
Right.
Not that I don't want, as like my flesh, like, do I think that would be so fun?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also like really love being in my bed and sleeping and like seeing my kids in the morning and stuff like that.
Having breakfast.
Yeah, having breakfast. Exactly that. Which made such a good breakfast the other day. Oh my God. But it's none of that stuff is off the table, but I'm just waiting kind of for God to show me.
That's amazing.
And
I did this a couple of weeks ago. We released it. I did this podcast on complete surrender. And one of the biggest revelations that I've had in this year in seeking the Lord out was like revelatory for me. But I have never had, ever had an issue with my identity being in what I did with my voice. And I can't tell you why that's happened. Like it's been the Lord's. It's always been the Lord's. And maybe I was thinking about this yesterday too, talking to somebody about stuff, but maybe I was in theater and I was only going to sing on the side because if I went to Broadway and I had to do a musical, I could do it. And so the emphasis was never in the singing. The emphasis was in the performing. Yeah. And I was an incredible performer. And so, but when I worshiped because my father was dead by the time I was 9. My mother was dead by the time I was 21. Lots of trauma in the house. And so I went to the piano and wrote songs to the Lord. Wow. So the music was private and personal, and it was only for the Lord. So when that transition happened, and it was like, when you act, you do that for the applause, but when you sing, I'm alone with you in a room and I get all that. Wow. So that translated into, oh, that thing is yours. So I think subconsciously, I just was like, yeah, that's yours. So whenever I had any like issues with my throat swelling at one point and like bleeding, that I just had this weird thing that happened years before where I could barely even sing. And my attitude with it was, oh, well. And it was like, let's not get dramatic, Lord. If you're trying to tell me something about my voice, just tell me to quit singing and I'll go get a day job. Right. That type of thing. It wasn't fear. It wasn't, but I've had fear and anxiety in what it's done to my back. Will I be able to walk? Finances, provision, my songs. Will people like it? Albums, that's where all of but never this. And so I kind of made had this revelation that I talked about on that podcast, Complete Surrender, where the revelation was the Lord coming in saying, because they found a tumor in my throat a year and a half ago. And the doctor said, if this grows and I have to do surgery on this type of tumor, you'll never sing again. And I'm like, what do you want to do? Come back every 3 months. I didn't go back. I didn't go back to 14 months. And a lot of it was just financially, what was I going to do? And so the Lord told me to go back, and it's completely eradicated off the x-rays, and he doesn't even know why. And so the Lord's like, well, the enemy can't have your voice.
Wow.
That's mine. But it created this thing in me where I'm like, I've been begging you to heal my back, but you won't touch it. I've been begging you for my finances, but you won't touch it. I've been begging you for my kid, but you won't touch it. And he's like, they're not surrendered. That's surrendered.
Wow.
And that was like mind-blowing for me.
Good Lord.
Because he's like, don't you remember how you feel? I can do anything with your voice. And if the enemy does anything to hurt your voice, I step in and I pull off, and I'm like, but I can't do that with your finances. I can't do that with your music. I can't do that with those, because it's this laborious thing of worry, fear, like, is God going to come through? And you're contending for this and you're stretched out. And it's so interesting, because what I hear you saying too is there's a complete surrender on this.
Oh, yeah.
And if there's no contention in it, and it's like, whatever the Lord wants me to do, it's like that. I just telling you, that is such the position of that is from somebody a lot older down the road. If you can find the complete surrender where whatever God's doing with you or whatever you have given to the Lord, that you lay it down and you're like, it's yours. And whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do it. There is a freedom in that like nothing else, because I had to actually have him be like, how do you feel? And I'm like, I don't even think about my voice. And people tell me all the time, how is it you're 57 and you sound like you're 30? And I'm like, but I've just never worried about, you must like be in vocal lessons all the time. No, like I drink dairy and coffee and caffeine. Like I don't, you know what I'm saying? It's like, it is a supernatural thing where the Lord will override something because it's in full surrender.
Yeah.
And I do think that so many of us in the church have to look at the thrashing that we're doing and the things that God's called us to, and really, really ask the question, are we in full surrender? Because if we're in full surrender, I don't think we're supposed to be thrashing. I don't think we're supposed to be like, what am I supposed to do? Even when God calls us to a different location or calls us into transition, it's like when he does that, there will always be a peace, even though there'll be a wonder about it. Even though it'll be like, well, we're doing what we feel like God's called us to do, and we're seeking peace in the moment that we're doing in the process of doing it. And if it's not the Lord, then what we do have peace in is that he'll meet us even on the other side and show us what to do then. That's even surrender. Yeah. Because you're still trying to find, that thing with the Lord. So I think it's really key, even for people in places like this, especially churches that are trying to cultivate things, if there's no authenticity, and then all of a sudden you're striving to make something happen because other people have set up this thing of what it's supposed to look like, it's like, it's never going to work for your church because you're striving to put the face of something else on your church. Yeah. And I do think that's important. Yeah. And I didn't know the story about 7Hills, but I was curious. And that actually speaks volumes to me about how you guys built that. Yeah. And that makes it feel super safe. And wonder, what does God have in the process? Anything can be ruined.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying, Kim? Anything can be ruined. Yeah. And we're all human. Right. And decisions are out of our hands sometimes. I mean, I found that even working at Gateway, where Gateway had all the money in the world. I think they still do have all the money in the world. They could make a project, $500,000 project. But when I came in to do battles, I was like, why are we doing that? Yeah. Like, it's nonsense. Right. Like, but they were never thinking, granted, give it to Gateway Church in Dallas. They were never thinking, oh, we want to get the world's attention. Right. They were like, we want to give our people songs to sing
Yeah.
from our house.
That's cool.
And the people bought the albums. Anytime they ever tried to go out, you almost need a different perspective if you want to launch that, because then you're going to need to have like a global perspective of how you're going to do this outside your own church. And when they wanted to do that, they didn't have the insight to know how to fully do that. So it didn't work. And they didn't use outside production. Everything was like closed off. And then I come in and I'm like, we're not doing that.
Right.
A, we're not spending that kind of money. B, we're not doing this. B, we don't need to do that. And you guys aren't producing because you're not producing the way that I'm going to bring something to the platform.
Yeah.
So, and it was a squirming situation for them because writing Defender, that wasn't their type of lyrical content.
Right.
And so they wouldn't even sing it for the longest time until other people started to sing it and they realized, oh, this is ours.
Yeah.
And they had to actually stand to own something that wasn't their language prior, but they believed in what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so because I was part of the family, even though I was kind of a little bit of a redheaded stepchild, they recognized that quite beautiful. Yeah. And I left giving them a record that was, I think, one of their best-selling projects.
Yeah. And when I say I had no concept, I knew nothing about how to make a record.
Wow.
And I found a guy. Every church has a guy.
Yeah.
Every church. It doesn't matter the size. You got a guy.
They're hiding somewhere.
And he was able to help. And I was able to do work at his house for him, like drywall work. And then he would produce the first couple tracks. And so we did a couple tracks for completely free. And I remember us like recording in his like attic studio that was, it was really, really ghetto. And those songs on Spotify made like a grand total of $15, in 2 or 3 weeks. Or months. And then we only released 2 songs that year. Then we had like $70-$80, saved that year. Okay, we can pay you $80 this time for this song. Wow. And so we paid someone $80 and we paid. And there's times where I think where we were like, well, we really want to do something. And so when it was kind of cooking a little bit more, we're like, well, can we do this? And then it's obviously going to pay itself back. And it was never anything more than a couple $100 because we just like keep going. Well, as it's grown now, every song, that's the sum of totals. And I tell this to worship leaders and people in churches all the time. You're going to have to, if you're doing this the way that I did it, and don't copy my model, but if you're doing it, you need 5-6 years. And nobody can stomach that. Nobody. Because
they want immediate gratification.
They want it that year. They want the first album or EP that they released to be on CCLI.
Yeah.
I was like, no, you stop it. You just literally right now, get your pastor ready. Nothing is going to happen for you most likely.
Yeah.
Unless you are massively consistent and faithful for 5 or 6 years.
That's so good, Kaelob.
Maybe more.
Yeah. Yeah.
7Hills Worship has been, I started in 2018 with the church. And the 7Hills Worship was our first release in 2018. We started writing before that, obviously. Nobody had listened to our music outside of our 4 walls.
Yeah.
Until 2022.
Wow.
Maybe 20, and that was just a little bit. And I'm not going to talk about numbers or anything, but the bell curve, almost everything that we've experienced where someone would be like, oh, you guys are starting to have some level of success. That's been in the last 13, 14 months. And so you're talking about, it took 5 years to see anything. And now it's so fun.
Right.
It's like, oh, well, great. This is so cool. And we were so slow.
Wow.
2 songs this year.
That's good advice.
3 songs the next year. 5 songs the next year. And we're doing buddy deal after buddy deal after buddy deal. And I think that people can get a little bit weird, like, oh, you're taking advantage of people with buddy deals. No, we're not.
It's part of partnership.
Right. I get a phone call or a DM on Facebook, which I never check, which I am being better at it.
Yeah.
Okay, now, if you DM us on Facebook, I see it. And it was a mix engineer in Missouri. His name was John Dirks. And he was just starting. And he said, I heard one of your guys' songs. I love your music. I'd love to mix. I'll mix for free. And I didn't even know who he was. But I just felt like God was saying, I sent you somebody.
Yeah, I sent you somebody. Go for it.
Here you go. Remember how I send you people? Remember how I do things like this? Mm-hmm. Here you go. Trust me. And so I said, okay. And so I taught myself how to produce that year.
Yeah.
And I'm producing whatever, and I'm doing all that. And then I'm sending it to him. And he's so honest and so great. He says, hey, your production is really bad. I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine named Colton Price, which I think you know Colton.
Yes.
And so he introduces me to Colton. I get on the phone with Colton. Colton asked me, hey, what's your budget? I said, I don't have one. $100? What do you think about that? I was like, I'll do whatever you want. I'll be your assistant on the song. You know, like I'll lay down stuff, whatever you need, but that's what I have. And he just said, I don't know. I believe in you guys. Let's do it. And he's like, maybe in the future we'll figure it out. So we started working together, and he did a ton of songs like that for me.
Wow.
They believed in us.
Yeah.
And over time we grew. Well, I can tell you that I don't do those buddy deals with these people anymore, as far as to say that they get points.
Right.
And full rates. And I have mixed every single 7Hills worship song with Jase Dirks.
But you've worked up to that.
Right.
You could start the partnership because you need the belief. And I actually think it's really good. In my 20s, Kaelob, I never got paid for singing on a record. Right. You know what I'm saying? I never got paid for doing Jack Diddley Squat. And it was some of the best years of my life because it was all this really great partnership of training. Like, no, I want to learn. I want to learn how to do it. I want to learn how to get in there and do it. And luckily there are people there's some people who will take advantage of you in that. But I think you work yourself into payment.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's we have a culture of entitlement.
Yeah.
And we've got to break that culture of entitlement, and because they're missing out on the partnership,
right? And they've grown with us,
community, yeah. So that's really that's amazing.
I think you have to be too. You can't abuse that. Like
I
had to be very hyper attentive to. Okay, well, this song is doing a lot better now. We have this much income this year, and then I made a rule to myself that I would never let it get to the point that they would ask me. I would initiate that first. Wow. Because I would want them to always feel the generosity coming from me.
Right.
Not that they felt like they had to ask for it.
Yeah.
And so I would say, hey, I have a little bit more. I would like to do more. Would you be okay with that? And of course the answer is always, yeah, of course. I'd love for you to pay me more or at all. And I've always done that.
Yeah.
And always wanted to be the first person. And you can never go wrong with generosity in this industry. Never. Because people aren't that way.
Right.
And so if you kind of become known for that, like, hey, we say what we're going to do. We do it.
Yeah.
We want to be generous to you, and we will be, and we'll pay you on time. That's another big one. And that has helped us in a lot of different ways that I've always been like, this industry doesn't particularly always value that. And so that's always been a really big value. So churches, worship leaders, songwriters, take your time, be okay to start small, take a chance on a kid. Is a big one too. Like, Ezra, we wrote with him the other day, and Ezra's working on Phil's stuff, Chris's stuff, everybody.
Yeah, and you took a chance on him.
I took a chance on him. I gave him his first copy of Ableton when he was 10.
My gosh.
He was 10 years old. I was like, hey, you have a laptop, right? He's like, I do. I was like, come here, I want to download something on it.
Wow.
And I downloaded Ableton for him, and he has Ableton now. Wow. And every time I got a plugin, I said, hey, log into my thing and download these plugins I just got. And so all my plugins are his plugins, and anything I ever got. And it was never like, I don't care. He wasn't producing really songs for us yet.
Right.
But I was like, this kid is great. And he has a gift, and I see it. Let's just value it.
Yeah.
And show him that there's no strings attached to this, and just be kind to him.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've done. And
that's so amazing.
And now he produces all sorts of stuff for us. And
he's great. He's a great kid.
He's an awesome kid.
Well, thanks so much for telling us a story. What a great story. I just want to encourage those of you that are out there that, that your worship pastors, you've probably been at it a long time. Maybe some of you are just coming in, but you kind of see this worship culture happening in the industry, and it's giving you this, what do we do? What does our church do? I think some of the stuff that's been said here is such incredibly, it's almost like tools in your tool belt to take in as you process and kind of walk through how to cultivate your own team and how to cultivate writers and singers and players and create this space for authenticity in your songwriting and what's happening in your local city, in your local body with your local people. And so I encourage you to do that. Encourage you maybe to listen to 7Hills if you haven't, and realize what it is you're listening to, and maybe let that inspire you in your own songwriting. So bless you guys, and we'll see you again on another podcast.